Good afternoon, everybody. Want to welcome you to today's Wednesday webinar here at TimeSolv, where you have the opportunity to learn the tips and tricks to get the most out of your TimeSolv account. This is Scott Clayson, Director of Marketing here at TimeSolv, and I will be your host for the next 45 minutes or so. We are going to start in about another minute or so. As always, as I see people filtering into the room and I see a lot of familiar names, those of you that have attended before know that you get an extra minute or so of time. Grab that last glass of water, cup of coffee, whatever you need to take you through this time with us today. So I'll be jumping back in here in about another minute or so. Thanks, everybody. Okay, without any further ado, let's go ahead and get started with today's webinar. Just a reminder for those who have not attended a Wednesday webinar before. This is our once a month, the second Wednesday of every month, time to get together and review the tip of the week emails that you should have received the previous 4 weeks. Those go out generally every Monday to all of the TimeSolv users who are designated as either administrators or they are the owners of the TimeSolv account. And again, the purpose here is to let people see some of the various features within TimeSolv that you may have learned at some point in time, maybe during your onboarding, maybe during your training. But if you don't use that particular feature all the time, you obviously are going to forget about it, but you may need it down the road. So we want to make sure that everyone is aware of all the features, whether brand new that we've just rolled out, which we introduced here on the Wednesday webinars, or features that have been part of TimeSolv since the very beginning, starting in 1999. So that's our purpose here today. And again, my name is Scott Clayson, Director of Marketing here at TimeSolv. We will last about 45 minutes, maybe a little shorter today, as we go through our tips. And everyone is on mute. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions. You should see a questions icon down in the bottom part of your screen where you can fire questions at me, and I'll generally answer them at the end of the webinar. So let's go ahead and get started. I hope everyone's staying cool for wherever you happen to be located. I know the East Coast is experiencing some hot weather. I'm sitting here in Minneapolis looking out my window at very hot. It's been in the 90s since like last Friday, which for us it's a really long stretch of time consecutively to be having highs over 90 degrees. I think it was 98 last Friday, 98 on Saturday, about 93 already here today at noon. So we are feeling the summer heat early in the year here in Minnesota, so we're not used to this. My poor tomatoes that we just planted a couple weeks ago they're not ready for the full heat of the season just yet. So anyway, neither here nor there. All right, let's talk about what we're going to cover today. All these topics are actually oldie but goodies. Aren't any particular new features that we're going to focus on today, although near the end, I want to briefly introduce a really big new feature that we did just put into production earlier this week, and we'll be making more announcements about it in the coming weeks. So that's a little teaser for you. So what we're going to talk about today is permissions, specifically how to manipulate the permissions of all your various users within your TimeSolv account, assuming that you have a TimeSolv account that's not just you as a solo user. The second topic, this one is the absolute oldie but a goodie. I will revisit because this seems to be one area that causes a lot of TimeSolv users some issues sometimes, is both creating and managing your contacts and associating them properly. And that's really the key thing, associating them properly to the either clients or matters that you're working on. So we'll cover that. The next one is one I know I've covered before. It's I think, a really cool feature that is unique within TimeSolv, and that is our time entry lockout options. And what that does when it comes to your timekeepers and their ability or inability to create time entries based on the options that you set up here. And we'll talk a little bit more about the reasons behind why this can be a really powerful tool in making sure that everyone is making time entries when they should be making time entries. And that's a huge part of making sure that everyone is getting their time entries in, that every amount of billable time is being accounted for. We know that a lot of attorneys and a lot of people who work on do project-based work, will admit that they don't always capture all the time possible. So this is one of those kind of tools in the toolbox of TimeSolv that can help make sure that happens. Then our last topic for the day, again, it's one that I've covered previously, but it's a subtle feature you don't necessarily use a lot, but it's really convenient when you do. And that is how to do mass rate changes on unbilled time entries that are sitting out there. And it's a really convenient thing. You don't have to go and hunt and peck through every single time entry that needs to have the rate change because the timekeeper's rate changed and you are retroactively assigning that new rate to all of that timekeeper's old entries. So that is our topics for the day. So let's go ahead and get started in talking about permissions. So let me just jump right into TimeSolv here. And you can see I'm right at our login screen. So as the administrator or owner of your TimeSolv account, you are the one who has the luxury of setting what your users can and, more importantly, cannot see within TimeSolv. And this is actually a unique differentiator between us and a lot of other time and billing programs. I know within the legal industry for sure, especially for firms that may have a lot of contract attorneys that pick up work on some matters here and there, are not full-time users necessarily, full-time partners or associates in your law firm. You want them to be able to enter time for the work they're doing for you, but obviously you don't want them to see really anything else necessarily that's happening within your firm. You don't want them to see other clients and matters. You don't want them to see invoices that have gone out to other clients. You don't want to even maybe have them see the billing rates that the other timekeepers in your system charge. So the permissions area is where you can set all of that. So you want to go under account to professionals. So this is the list of all of your various either timekeepers or support users. And by the way, those of you who have been longtime users probably know this may not say professionals in your account. You can definitely, this is just a side tangent here. If you go under account settings, there are multiple options of what to call that professional label. So it comes out of the box the same professional, but you can change this to, you may have changed this already if you're using TimeSolv Pro. I believe it comes up with employee. I'm not 100% sure, I don't recall. Anyway, that's an aside. So we're gonna go under account to professionals. And here's where I have a list of all of my professionals and the type of user they are. And there's only two types of users that you can have designated in TimeSolv. Either they are a timekeeper or they are a support person. The difference is a support person can enter time for others, but cannot enter time for themselves. They can run invoices, they can send invoices, they can edit invoices if you give them the right permissions, and do create new clients, create new matters, and all of those sort of things if you'd like them to. The only difference is they cannot actually make time entries for themselves. They can make it for others. So let's click on Tony Hill, for example, as our professional. So when you want to edit the permissions for one of your users, the obvious thing to do is click on their name, and you come to the profile information for them, which is, great. You can change their default rate if they have to have an approver for their time entries, all this sort of good stuff here, if they have commissions and so on. But the tab we're most interested in is this permissions tab here. So I'm going to go and take a look at the permissions. Now, when you are on this tab as an administrator or a firm owner, you're going to automatically see that you are checked as an administrator. And if you want Tony Hill, for example, to be an administrator, you would check this box. That would give them access to the entire everything within TimeSolv. Otherwise, this is where for each main area of TimeSolv, you can designate how much access they want. And you'll notice that each row here roughly translates to our main navigation headers up here. So you have dashboard first, dashboard's over here on the left, and clients. Documents is the one that's a little out of place. You have time entry, you have expenses, invoices, payments, there's documents, reports, and account. The calendar and the to-do are just by default are going, we don't have to worry about permissions in those areas. So depending on the area of TimeSolv you want to restrict access to, you'll have some different options. So for example, our dashboard over here, it's either just they don't have access to it at all, or they can only view what's happening there. Now with clients and subsequently matters and everything else underneath there, you could give them no access here, obviously, view only, so they'd be able to see everything, every client, every matter, and so on, or all access, where they can do all the edits, everything they want. You can also check this box, allowing them to only have access to matters that have been assigned to them. So if we're over here in the client matter area, and it's this property settlement matter that I'm working on, and I have under team here assigned this to Tony Hill, then he'd be able to see this matter, but not any other that's not assigned to him. So that's what that means. Same thing with time entries here. Then this is where they could do just make time entries for themselves or for all timekeepers. Now, as an admin or a firm owner, by default, you can make time entries for anyone else at the firm. Support people can too when you designate that, and I'll show you that in a second. So if you want to lock this down a little tighter, you would say, you know what, Tony Hill can only do time entries for themselves. This update billable type by default is not checked, which means they can't determine if the time entry that they're making is going to be billable, non-billable, or no charge. Now, I have this obviously set up in my account. Even as admins and firm owners, you don't see this by default. By default, that box is unchecked for everybody. Actually, no, I believe administrators do have that. They have all access to that, so never mind. And then same thing, obviously, are you going to allow them to view their billable rate and overwrite it if possible? You would check this box. The rest of these rows are pretty self-explanatory about what they can do in invoices. There's a lot of options here. Same thing with payments, if you want to allow them or not allow them to view the payments that have been made, no access at all, so on. Same thing under the account area. If you don't want them to be able to view any other of the account information, you can certainly set that as well. So, for example, if we have somebody that is a support person, let's go back to our support professional that we had, and that was Harvey Martin. You'll notice that under permissions, I said, hey, I'm going to give them access to specific timekeepers. And then you can select, so Harvey Martin, if I check these boxes here, he can make time entries for just these people, but nobody else. So this is a great feature for if you have paralegals or administrative assistants who generally make time entries for the attorney, but you don't want them to be able to make time entries for any other attorneys. This is where you would leverage that ability. that out. And same thing, even if you wanted like Tony Hill as a timekeeper, when we go under permissions here, and we'd say, you know what? Oh no, he is just for all timekeepers, or yeah, okay. So it is for support users only. So let's look at how TimeSolv looks for Tony Hill. When basically he has no access to anything other than just matters that are assigned to him. I'm going to go ahead and log out as the owner of this account and log back in as Tony Hill. Oh, my password expired for Tony Hill. So, okay, bear with me here. Let me create a new password. I'll use my, yeah, I'll use that password. Change it and replace it in my handy dandy Dashlane, which is my password manager. Okay, so password's been changed successfully. So let's go back into Tony Hill. Log out and log back in. Oh, you know what? This is he doesn't see anything right here because I didn't give him access even to time entry. So forgive me here. Make sure he can see something within TimeSolv. So I want Tony Hill to be able to make time entries for just himself. So I am going to set his permissions here to time entry only for himself and only for his own expenses. Okay, so now let's see what TimeSolv looks like for Tony. So you can see he now has a very different looking TimeSolv. He really only sees at the top here the time entry screen and the expense entry screen, and he only has the ability to search for his own time entries. When it comes to matters, when this is his matter list, these are only the matters that are assigned to him, not all the matters are within TimeSolv. So again, it has no, he doesn't have the option, to see his rates, for example. He doesn't have the ability to change his rates. He can't change the billable type. Any of that he can't do. He can't see anything anybody else is doing within TimeSolv. So if you have contract attorneys or extra help that you're bringing in, somebody who you just want them to make time entries against clients and matters or clients and projects, but you don't want them to see anything else, this is a really powerful way to make that happen. Okay, we did have a question come across about making a staff member inactive. I assume that if an active staff member is turned inactive, but a new staff member is added, that billing would reflect that accordingly, or how would that work? That's a little different question. So I'm not exactly sure what you mean by if a new staff member is added, that billing would reflect that accordingly. If a staff member has in time or expense entries that have not been billed, when an invoice is generated for that staff member, even if they're inactive, it's going to generate the invoices with those entries, regardless. And then when you add a new staff member and they create their entries, it's not like you can, if you'd like, you could take existing time entries from like if I wanted to take this time entry over here, this Best Buy one, and I want to edit that time entry and have it not be for Scott Laidlaw, but because Scott Laidlaw left and it becomes Doug Cosby's, then you would change it in that fashion. Yes. And it would change the rate. Notice the rate changed from 285 to 200. So perhaps that's what you're asking me. See, it goes back to 285 here now. So that would be one way to, if you have to, but I don't think anybody would have that probably scenario, because if it's an old staff member that you haven't billed yet and they're gone, you want to bill them at the old rate and designate that that's the person. So hopefully I answered your question. Okay, let's move on to our next topic. Any other questions about permissions? Okay. Let's next talk about creating and managing contacts. Now, this is, I know for those that have been sitting in here previously, you might be like, Scott, why are you covering this topic again? But as I've said before, a lot of our support staff have mentioned that one of the highest volume questions they'll get is about managing contacts within TimeSolv. Um, so let's review that again. So first of all, you can create your contacts in a couple places. You can go under clients here to contacts and create a new contact here. That's one way. The way that's probably easiest or and leads to less problems, I would think, is if you create them at the client or matter level. Now, if you have a client and they're the only contact you're going to have, fantastic. I would just at the client level here. So let's just click on Chiara here. I go to my contacts tab, and right now I don't have anybody associated. So this is great. It's like a new client, let's say. So Chiara is the one and only contact I have for this matter that I'm working on. This is easy. So I'm going to create a contact for her. The type is going to be main, and I'll cover the rest in a second. So we have the first name, Alan. An email, we'll just put in my email. And then you can have address, office phone number, and so on. Okay. So I'm going to save that. Now, when you go to create an invoice for this client, Chiara, it will automatically grab her name and information and place it on the invoice. Piece of cake. Where it can get challenging is if you are working on multiple matters for the same client and they have told you that there should be a different contact for each of the matters, or if you have one main contact here, but they tell you, I want to have my invoice sent to somebody else. So I'm the CEO, you're doing work for me, but please send the invoice to my accountant. They should be getting the bills, not me. So the way you could do that, and let's first take it at the client level. If you have somebody else other than your main contact who should be on the invoice and receive the invoice, here's what you do. You go under new contact. We'll create the name of that contact. We'll just do the same email address just for the sake of simplicity. And instead of their type being main, I am going to label them as the optional invoice type, which means they should get the invoice, not the person designated as main. Okay. So that's the difference. TimeSolv, when it goes and creates these invoices, will look and first look at the matter level and say, are there any contacts designated at the matter level? No? Okay, let's go up to the client level. Are there any contacts at the client level? Yes. What's their contact type? Is there any contact type of optional invoice? In this case, yes. So put Gabriel Allen on there. If Gabriel Allen was not there and he only had a main contact, they would be placed on the invoice. The matter level works the exact same way. So when you go to your matters here, if they're the only people that you have as contacts, there's no need to add them at the matter level or the project level. When you go to contacts here, you're going to see that the default invoice contact is listed right here. Okay, so you can see that. They're already set up. If that's it, that's fine. Don't need to touch it. Don't need to add them at the contact level. There is a different contact who should receive an invoice at this particular project level, then you want to go ahead and add them like I did before. And you can call them a main contact if you'd like, or you can call them optional invoice if you'd like. Either way, as I mentioned, TimeSolv is going to check at the project or matter level first for a contact. If there's none listed, then it rolls up in its hierarchy to the client level and looks for first a contact with the optional invoice type. If there's nobody there listed as the optional invoice type, it'll roll up and say, is there a contact that has main? as the type. Now, if you believe you already have a contact in the system that you created previously, you can associate them with different clients if you'd like. So in this contacts area here, both at the client level and the matter level, you'll see it says only show me the contacts that are associated with this client. But I could also just see all contacts if I'd like. Here's all my contacts I have in my system. And if I wanted to have Byron Buxton be associated with this matter or this client, I would go over here to associations and I could start typing or choose either at the client level or a particular matter level what I want them to be and what their type is. And obviously, as you saw, you can also create related parties or just other contact types. Okay, so that gets us that is probably an option that you don't have to work through very frequently in trying to find an already existing contact and associating them with a client or matter. Most often, you're going to be creating your contacts when you're setting up your clients and matters, one would assume. Perhaps if you are using TimeSolv to have contacts that are prospects, like people you haven't engaged in work yet, they may be in the system. And if that's the case, then certainly you can just go and search for them and associate them to the client that you set up, or the matter that you set up. Any questions on that, on contacts? One last thing I like to tell people is if you have somebody that says, send the invoice to my bookkeeper, in this case, Gabriel, but I want to be CC'd on the email that you send with the invoice so I can see that it went to my bookkeeper. The way you handle that is under the invoice settings. So on the invoice settings tab, under invoice delivery, there's a place to put additional emails. And that's where you can add additional people's emails. If you click here and you know you have them as a contact, it's very simple. You can just check the box, hit select, and it'll enter their email address for you, which is really convenient. Because oftentimes that's the way in which it's going to be somebody who's your main contact and says, no, I need somebody else optionally to be receiving the invoice. Okay, questions on contacts before we move on? All right, very good. Let's now take a look at our next topic, time entry lockouts. Okay, I'm going to make the assumption that, somebody did ask a question about deleting duplicates. Deleting duplicates out of TimeSolv. I did not cover that. Delete duplicate contacts is what I assume you meant. When you go under clients and contacts, you will notice there's a place where you can look for potentially duplicate contacts that we believe are duplicates. So we have the same first name, last name, email. And then it tells me there's two contacts named Laura Miller with this email address. So if I click on details here, then I can merge them into one. And you can see the associations if you'd like, and which one you're going to be merging it into if need be. So you're not really deleting duplicates as much as you are merging duplicates. And as soon as you say, yeah, I want to merge into this one, and I'm going to check the box there and merge selected. And if you had if you had 3 or 4 people, you would just check those 3 or 4 boxes and merge selected contacts. Okay, so let's talk about the time entry lockout option. So what does that mean exactly? I'm going to make the assumption that everyone here on this webinar has a buttoned up written timekeeping policy for all of your users, in which they all know how they should be entering their time by whatever your rules are. Maybe it's the end of the day, the end of the week, whatever the case may be. But you really should have a time entry policy, absolutely positively. And this will help you really separate time entries from happening at the time that you generate invoices. Because oftentimes by the time you're generating invoices, then your time entries could be weeks old and not as accurate as they should be. So one way to really enforce the time entry options or time entry creations, I should say, is with this time entry lockout option we have. What does that mean? It means you can designate how far back or how far into the future you want to allow your timekeepers to make time entries. So if you say, hey, it's the first of the month or whatever, and you can't make any time entries from May 31st, let's say, and before, you can do that. So what you do is you go under time and settings, and you'll notice that there is the second row here of this general tab is the time entry lockout. And you have a couple of options here. The one I like is allow entries during a rolling period. So you could say nobody can make any time entries that are older than 3 days. So if somebody tries to make a time entry from last week, last Friday, they can't. They can't make that entry. They're locked out. So this really enforces they'd have to make that walk of shame down the office hall to your office as a billing manager and say, I needed to do a time entry from last Friday, but I'm locked out. I can't do it. They're only going to want to make that walk of shame once, right? So you could say 3 days in the past. You can also do a few days in the future because we do know that a lot of users of TimeSolv will actually set up time entries ahead of time without any time actually entered yet and use that as their to-do list. So, they might come into, the time entry screen here and they know that on, this Friday, I'm going to be appearing in court. So they'll create a time entry ahead of time and then they'll fill in the hours afterwards. It's a whole kind of to-do list. So that's why you can set it in the future as well. So in this case, I'm saying I'm not going to allow any time entries from 3 days ago and no days in the future. You could also have an on or after date and say allow entries on or after a certain date. So maybe that's the beginning of the month. So I'm going to allow all time entries that are on June 1st or after. So it's kind of opening up the window, if you will, for June and future time. Or you could say, I'm going to just allow time entries for all the dates out there. Okay. I like the rolling one myself personally. So the way that looks then, to give you the real, let's go back to poor Tony Hill here. And so we did 3 days, right? So let's see if he can make a time entry on June 1st. So I'm clicking on June 1st here. I'm going to find a task that's been assigned to him. I'm going to tell him he needs to do it he's going to do it in 1.5 hours. You can't quite see that, but 1:30. And by the way, if you didn't know, you can enter your time either in like increments like tenths, like 1.5, or you can do it as 1:30, 1 minute, 1 hour, 30 minutes. Conference call. Time entry prior to June 6, 2021 is not allowed because of my time entry lockout options. So they can't make that entry for June 1st. Now, as an administrator and firm owner, you can make that time entry. So Tony Hill is making the walk of shame down to my office, and I'll make that time entry for him. And now he knows. And then you read him the riot act and let him know how disappointed you are in him. and he has to then make sure he gets his time entries in no later than 3 days from the current date, or no later than. So I think it's a great tool for making sure time entries get in when they should be getting in. Okay. All right. Let's look at our last topic for the day. Any questions on that, by the way? I did see another question came in about contacts. I'm going to wait to the very end of the session here before getting to that. I don't want to go too far off topic. Okay, no other questions that I can see about time entry lockout. So our last topic of the day is on rate changes. Okay, so what does this mean? I know for, especially if you're a firm that does any type of contingency billing or class action, I know lawsuits where you may be working on a particular matter for several years before the judge, awards a settlement. And I know in talking to firms that oftentimes the judge will allow a firm to update their billable rate to today's rates and not the rate when they first created time entries, let's say 3 years ago, because you change your rates every year, I'm assuming. So how do you go about finding and updating old time entries that have yet to be billed to the current rate of your timekeepers? So your timekeeper might have a rate of $200 3 years ago, but now they're at 250, and you want to update those time entries from 3 years ago to his current rate or her current rate. It's real easy to do in TimeSolv without having to hunt and peck for the actual entries themselves and updating them. What you do is you go under time to settings, just like where you're going to for your time entry lockout, and go to this tab called rate changes. Now, what this is going to do is find any time entries that are unbilled for the period of time that you designate and for the client and matter that you designate. And it's going to show you, okay, here's the time entries that were made. Here was the old billing rate it was set to, but here's the new rate that is current for that timekeeper. So in this case, I'm just going to do all matters for all time. And you can also, as you can see here, check a box where if the rate has been overridden, it's going to show you those time entries too. So I'm going to hit search. But this is the case where you could do it for a particular client and matter. Obviously, you could just search here and find it. And you can see now I have a list of, what is it? Doesn't give me a number here. Um, a whole bunch of time entries, right? I can hover over this page icon. It's going to give me more details like the description of the time entry and so on. But more importantly, it's showing me, okay, here's how many hours was worked on. Here's what the old rate was for Scott Laidlaw, and here's what the current rate is for Scott Laidlaw, and for all the professionals here that you can see. So I can select all of these and scroll down to the bottom and click on Update Rates in Selected Time Entries. And in one fell swoop, these, what was it, maybe 50, 60 time entries have now been updated to the current billing rate for those timekeepers. Again, super powerful, I think. Really, really fast and easy way to update your rates for time entries that have yet to be billed. Questions on that? Okay. One last question that did come in about contacts. When talking about merging of duplicates, ask, the follow-up was, should you look at the associations before merging to be sure they're associated with the correct matter? Yes, I would. But remember, when you merge the contacts, it's going to be create associations for both kinds. So if you have two duplicate contacts, one's associated at the client level, one's associated with the matter level or whatever, when you merge it, it's just going to merge them both together. So yes, you should double check and see. You may have it designated for several. See which one you want to be kind of the master duplicate, and then when you merge them, yeah, it'll be associated to both of those. Then you may have to undo the associations, which is easy to do by just going to. Oh, here, let me just show everybody instead of verbally talking. So potentially duplicate contacts. So Toya Mason, hit the details, and I could see the associations if I'd like. Okay, yeah, this is where he is at the client level. set as an optional invoice, and he has portal access, for example. And the other one is set as the client level optional invoice for Bob Smith. But when I merge this, and let's go ahead and merge, it'll tell you the merge into client will remain associated with the client's matters for all the selected contacts. So now he will be associated, his associations, Toy Mason, will be for both Bob Smith and the July. Now, if he shouldn't be the contact for one of these two, then you just uncheck the box and hit save association, and you'll be fine. Okay. Oh, good question came up about the rate change. Where do you put in the new rate in the first place? That's a super good question. If you don't know, and I guess I was assuming you would as administrators or firm owners, but I shouldn't assume anything. You can go ahead and do that at the professional level as well. So go under Account and Professionals, click on the particular timekeeper, and in their profile, this is where their default billing rate is here, about 3/4 of the way down the right-hand column, and you can update their default billing rate. This also allows you to access any global rates or matter rates you may have created for Mike Hagman. So I can click on matter rates here and see that for these particular matters, I have changed his rate, and you can change them here as well if you'd like. If you have global rates that you've created that Mike Hagman is part of, you can see Mike Hagman is part of the 20% nonprofit rate that I've created. He's part of a 5% adjustment rate, and so on. I can then update them here as well. So for any one timekeeper, you go to click on their name under Account Professionals, and on the Profile tab here, then you go down to the default rate, and that's where you would change it. Good question. Okay, any other questions that you have about what you've seen here today? Okay. One last thing I want to just part with is I mentioned this at the top, a little bit of a tease. We have now created, I've talked about this in previous, I think, webinars, where we had an integration with LexCharge, a payment processing portal along with LawPay. We have now rolled out and introduced TimeSolv Pay, our own payment processing merchant account that essentially is like LawPay that you can now use in your TimeSolv account. You're going to get better rates than LawPay, in fact, we guarantee it. And you're going to find a nice integration between TimeSolv and TimeSolv Pay. So under Payments and Settings, this is just a little bit of a tease. You now should see a tab called TimeSolv Pay. When you click on that, you'll have the option to create an account. And there are several steps you have to go through because it is a financial, you're opening up a financial account, you will need some financial information. You have to provide social security number and date of birth and so on. But most of you that if you're accepting electronic payments already, you've been through that drill. You will get approved within 48 hours, oftentimes sooner, sometimes within an hour. You can get approved really quickly, get up and running, link your TimeSolv Pay account to your bank accounts that you already have within TimeSolv. And you can go ahead and do everything that you could do, like we say with LawPay or LexCharge, store payment information at the client or matter level, run payments, charge those credit cards however you see fit. You can go to our TimeSolv Pay portal, and this is where you will see all of the payments that have come in. Notice it's labeled as TimeSolv Pay down here. And you can see the various sales and so on. You could run one-off payments if you'd like. You could just take a payment over the phone, for example, here. Right now, you still would have to go back to TimeSolv and record that payment in the payments area. That part of the integration is coming, where it should automatically move that over to TimeSolv. You could even, there's a little apps area here where you could create a payments button or a link on your website that people could go to make a payment. All very exciting stuff. We're very excited to get it out. There's going to be even more enhancements to this. We're excited. It's essentially white labeling a very robust and deep payment processing merchant called Stacks. So we are think this is a pretty awesome way to really have a tightly integrated, all in one place location to not only send your invoices, but receive payment for your invoices. Manage it all under TimeSolv with TimeSolv Pay and TimeSolv. And again, we guarantee we'll be able to match any rates that you currently get with LawPay or any other merchant provider. And again, you can take payment through the portal if you'd like. You can do it right in TimeSolv here. If you have, you can store, as we've shown before. And I don't want to get too deep into this because this is a whole other webinar I'm going to do. But you can store payment information at either the client level or the matter level. In this case, it's the payment settings, and here's the card information. This is being held at TimeSolv Pay over here. This Amir consultant, I can see, in my customer list, there's Amir consultant, and I have his payment profile information. It's there. I can run a payment anytime I want from a sent invoice. I sent out the invoice, I check a box, I hit charge, and it runs that payment because I have it on file. So exciting stuff. If you want to learn more about this, you can go to timesolvpay.com and you can actually book a meeting with our payment experts, and they can explain more about how it works in the process of applying. There is no monthly fee for having a TimeSolv Pay account. Again, that's different from LawPay, which I know charges like $20 a month. But if you're not accepting electronic payment, you should. And we believe this is the cheapest way to do that, to actually accept electronic payment. So let me just quickly put the website address for you all, timesolvpay.com. Okay, that was just a quick tease. There'll be more announcements you'll be seeing via email. I'm very excited about it. So, okay, we covered a lot of ground today. And I really thank everybody for joining me here for today's webinar. If you have any questions, as always, you are free to send in an email to support@timesolv.com. Give our support staff a call at the number you see there, extension 2. And if you have ideas on improvements in the TimeSolv product, please head to timesolv.ideas. Whoa, what happened to my screen? Hello. timesolv.ideas.aha.io. Again, I will put that in the chat for everybody. Okay, thanks everybody. Have a great rest of your day. I will send out an email with a link to watch this webinar again. And we will talk, let's see, it looks like it's gonna be July 14th will be the next time we'll be meeting. So have a great rest of the first half of your summer, and we will talk to you then. Have a great day, everybody.